Well, hello, everyone. We are super excited to have you here for the Curating an Inclusive Collection panel. Before we get started, we'll do some introductions. So who wants to go first?
I'll go. Hello, my name is Nicole Heinzelman, and I'm head of adult services at the Winter Park Public Library. I have been a librarian for 20 years. I think this year is my 20-year anniversary, and I have seen a lot of changes in the business since then, both technological and sociologically speaking, yes. And as head of adult services, I supervise a number of professionals in our department, and I'm also working on collection development, creating and offering classes, and thinking big things and ideas for the new building that is set to open towards the end of this year. And one more thing for the collection, I order for adult fiction and a little bit of nonfiction, and all of the DVDs in the adult collection, so both feature film and documentary.
All right. Thank you, Nicole. Lisa, Jessica?
Sure, Jessica, why don't you go ahead?
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Hi, I am Jessica Darden. I am a bookstagrammer at Boho Bookish on Instagram, where we talk about books. It's a platform. If you know Instagram, you know that there are people who come together who talk about books and promote books and do a variety of things. They cosplay book covers, they talk about books, they review books. So that's what a bookstagrammer does, and that's where I am. And I am a diverse, I promote mine as a diverse bookstagram page where I highlight BIPOC and LGBTQIA books.
Great.
Okay, and I'm Lisa Blue. I am the team librarian at Winter Park Library and have been so for the last 15 years. I love it because even though I'm a middle-aged lady, I think in my mind, teens are my tribe, and that's who I identify with and have the best rapport with. And so my collection responsibilities in the library include basically the entire teen collection of books, audiobooks, magazines. I also assist in the DVD collection with titles that would be appealing to teens, although I think most of them are streaming these days and not watching DVDs. Video games, and I also am the volunteer coordinator for the teams. And we've recently started this very exciting group called the Teen Book Guild, where it is their mandate to promote their love of reading to other teens in the community. And we are doing some exciting things with that. So I'm looking forward to seeing where we go.
Very cool. And I'm Wendy Hodges. I'm a book blogger and reviewer on the blog Weekend Reader, and I primarily read contemporary literary fiction with a heavy emphasis on romance. And as you can tell by my shelf, this is the romance section of my office. So I'm so excited to be here. And we only have 45 minutes, so I want to delve in so we can spend time helping readers and participants to kind of understand the importance of having an inclusive collection and what that process looks like. So first question, and anyone can jump in. What's your process to curate an inclusive collection? And that could be the process that you identify the books or the reason why you identify books to add to your collection.
Okay, I guess I can start. There's a couple things that have always been important to me when making the book purchasing decisions for the teens, a very volatile but really vital group. First is that the books reflect their tastes and interests, but even more importantly, that they're able to recognize themselves and their experiences in the stories that they have access to. In the early days, back in '06, it was a struggle to find many of the review and collection development resources that I could find to help me reach those goals. But in the last couple of years, the publishing landscape has changed quite drastically. And they're becoming much more mindful of diversity and representation in books they publish. And I really appreciate that. It's made my job easier and much more fun.
Great. Anyone else?
I'll go ahead and add on to what Lisa mentioned. I read many reviews from professional journals to the Library Journal, Publishers Weekly. Our vendor, Baker and Taylor, they offer selection lists and a publication called Forecast. And each of those typically tends to highlight different groups of different interests. So I like to go there for those reviews. And also we do get a lot of suggestions from our community as well. So we take those into account. I'd also think that within the past 10 years, gosh, has it been that long, social media has really played a huge role in providing titles that we may have never heard of otherwise, that wouldn't make it into an NPR talk show or on Good Morning America or something that would be considered more mainstream. So a place like Goodreads is another resource I've gone to in the past. And again, the social media definitely allows for content creation and input from people we would otherwise have never had a chance to meet or hear about their reviews and thoughts. So I think that's the critical component to curating, in addition to using the traditional resources.
Great, thank you.
For me, when I started bookstagramming and looking for more diverse reads, I did go to Instagram because I was already on that platform, and I needed to find things that were different than what mainstream was putting out. And I literally had to search Black authors in the search bar to get more diverse and inclusive stories that I wanted, that I wasn't seeing when I just looks books up. And so that's how it started for me. And also as a parent, because I'm not in a professional setting when it comes to reading, this is my own personal space. And as a parent, I haven't seen things change with reading in the schools. And so I wanted to bring diverse literature into my home that my kids could read that reflected them in the pages. So that's how my inclusive reading and diverse reading has started about 1.5 years ago, when I really started diving into wanting more and different stories that wasn't mainstream.
Yeah, that's a really great point, because as I only started blogging in 2017, and when I entered into that space, I was really looking at traditionally published books, and we could probably have a philosophical discussion on the diversity of traditionally published books. But once my blog started getting a little bit movement, I saw there was a great opportunity to kind of engage in more diverse stories through indie presses and self-published authors. And I know there's some conversation about, is it the same? But for me, it has been one of the best and the easiest way to make sure that, one, I'm supporting diverse stories, but also authors that might not necessarily have the same kind of broad range. So for me, social media has been one of the access points to make sure that my reading has continued to be inclusive first. So great, thank you everyone for that first one, for first response. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you prioritize the books as you're selecting them, and why it might be important for you to select a book versus maybe another book?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, please.
My process, when I, because I said, once again, this is like personal for me. I have biracial children. My husband's Black, I'm Puerto Rican. So I wanted stories that reflected, that were Black stories or Latinx stories. And so I would go through that process and when I started. Now, I think my process is I've been focusing on Black authors and Latinx authors, but I'm also trying now to make sure I'm having Indigenous stories as well. And I think that's kind of has been my focus. But I have like put in making sure um, I'm looking at I'm looking at what my fellow bookstagrammers are reading as well. And I've learned and grown so much. And there's so many people out there that are trying to push diverse stories as well. So I look at what are those bookstagrammers reading and trying to say, okay, I know I'm reading this, which is great. I'm touching on Latinx, Black, and Indigenous authors, but how can I fill in some of those gaps? And I use those bookstagrammers to help me, evolve my reading, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I can jump in. As a book blogger, I look at my reading year to year and try to close gaps. So I'm making sure that if anyone is coming to me for a recommendation, it's not the same types of books. And so last year I was definitely lacking in terms of Black romance. I read a lot of interracial romance. So 2021, I prioritized specifically Black romance, which is Black author and Black characters falling in love. And so that was important, as well as looking at ableism, how that shows up in stories. That was something that I think I noticed towards the end of 2020. There were a little bit more stories that I thought that I could infuse, and not necessarily it was in the blurb, but it's a part of the story. And for me as a reviewer, it captures, a wide range of experiences that I think sometimes we might not realize are missing. And so for me, year to year, I'm looking at my overall reading and seeing if there are opportunities for me to maybe expand my reading or even close some gaps.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So this question might take some time. So, if everyone can chime in, what advice would you give to a reader, either in your teen space or maybe with your children? What advice would you give to someone who is interested in diversifying their reading?
Going a more traditional route, I know that, yes, Instagram is a great place, as is YouTube. There's a ton of booktubers, as you well know, that can give great advice, and your friendly local librarian, which is more than happy to provide you with some information. But I would say you can actively seek out resources that provide you with guidance on myriad title and author suggestions. There are many diverse book awards out there that identify outstanding literature that's representative of a given cultural or ethnic identity. A couple examples are the Stonewall Book Award that honors books with exceptional merit for LGBTQ experience, the Coretta Scott King Book Award that recognizes outstanding African American authors and illustrators that demonstrate an appreciation for that culture and universal human values in youth books. Also, UCF has started a diverse families bookshelf, which I think is an incredibly useful database in my own personal reading and collection development. It connects families with youth literature that reflects and validates myriad experiences. And this just isn't race and culture, LGBTQ, but also health and ability and disability, diversity, family relationships, foster care, divorce, adoption. And it's a tool that you can search for certain experiences, and they'll come up with a recommended title list. And one final one to tell you about is We Need Diverse Books, which is a nonprofit that was started by a couple of young adult authors, which has a great find a book tool that you can specify the reading experience you want. You can list your reading level, genre, the identities and experiences and the story elements you want, and they will come up with recommended titles for you. And I've found that really fun to explore and very helpful.
Building on what Lisa said, I would also add that you can find all of this within the same genre that you love to read. So if you love to read mysteries, it doesn't mean you can't read mysteries anymore, because there are people of all backgrounds and ethnicities that are writing mysteries. So don't be concerned about going outside of your genre zone, comfort zone. But by all means, if you want to go big, then do. But there are so many possibilities out there for genres as well. For finding new authors, in addition to what Lisa suggested with the awards out there, our library offers Hoopla, and many public libraries across the country offer Hoopla. And it's a streaming service for movies and music, but it also offers plenty of ebooks and audiobooks. And they have some wonderful curated lists of books by topic, by voice, by ethnicity, background, etc. So that would be one resource. Another resource many libraries offer is a database called Novelist, which is somewhat like Goodreads, but you can search for keywords, and you can also select ethnicities of authors. You can also select if they are male, female, trans, etc. They don't have one for sexual orientation. I was in there today, but they do have one for the gender. So there are many ways that you can search for your next read using something like Novelist. So, yes, that is what I would say.
Yeah, I think, Nicole, that was a really good piece of advice, that if you read in a particular genre, there's usually an author who might present the stories in a different way. And so for anyone that asks for recommendations, I would start with, well, what are you comfortable with? What stories do you think you want to learn about? And start from there, because most genres, what you're seeing is traditionally published, but there are all these subgenres and different presses that could infuse different stories. And for me, I always try to help people see beyond. Maybe you need to start with the story isn't based in the US, and then from there going to maybe it's someone who is a different ethnicity from you, and then you add on maybe there's a different ability, and maybe there's something that you're willing to maybe enter in and read that might make you uncomfortable, so then you can learn from a different perspective. I think sometimes readers don't read diversely because they think that they can't have the same reading experience if they're not reading what they're used to. And I think when you expand your book collection, it gives you an opportunity to see the stories might be similar, but told in a different authorial voice or setting or writing style that increases your ability to see stories in a lot of different ways. That's okay. I don't know if you wanted to add to that.
No, I think I really agree with what you said. Like, just because you don't read fantasy doesn't mean you have to read fantasy. You could read what you like, but I think it is doing the work to go in there in your database or TikTok, Book Talk, and look for those authors, writers, reviewers who don't look like you, who may not have the same background as you, who live a different lifestyle as you, and learn from them. Just to, Will it change your mind? Maybe not, but it's good. That's a great start to, diversify your reading. You don't have to relate to it to read it. You could just consume the book to just to understand someone, and that is like my center. I'm reading not to relate, but to understand the world around me, because there's so many different people around me. I can't stick to the same thing all the time. That wouldn't make me an empathetic human being. And I read to be more empathetic to the people in the world around me.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the list that you all talked about. Another thing that I think could be helpful is authors are usually friends, right? And they read each other's works and often are recommending books in their same genre, but also in other genres because they have writing friends. So that might also be an opportunity for you to increase learning about another author, because they might be recommending something they are reading from an arc, or just in general, like they're excited about the story. We kind of touched on this, but I want to, since this is a Winter Park festival, I want to spend some time kind of talking about what are the services available for readers locally to engage in the library system. What kind of services should they be aware about that they can use to help expand their collection?
Oops, I think I meant I touched on that in my answer, but I'm always happy to talk about Hoopla. And I think Hoopla's been around, gosh, how long, Lisa? About 5, 6 years, maybe even longer. And we just began offering it, say, a little over a year ago. And it's the same collection that is available to all public libraries across the country. So we don't curate it. That is one collection we don't curate. We can make little carousel displays within our Winter Park entry portal, but we don't select the titles. But I am relieved and happy that they do have a fine selection, and they have taken the time to curate lists for different voices and backgrounds. So that has been very helpful. The novelist database I mentioned earlier, it's a little clunky to get in there at first, but once you do, it is well worth your time, because you can really go down the rabbit hole in that. Because besides ethnicity and gender status, you can search for authors from different countries, and along with many other key elements of books, the genres, locations, etc., and the Lexile ratings. And then we also have in the past had a reading contest through a service called Beanstack, and I think Lisa can talk to you more about that.
Sure. Yeah. That was actually just last couple months ago. With our Read Woke challenge, where we invited the people of the community to read different types of books that were written to or from different types of authors. We had African American authors, Asian American authors, neurodiverse authors, LGBTQ authors, and the goal was for people to choose a book that represented one of those challenges, and they would earn a badge once they had read the book. And I'm hoping that we expand on that next year. We offered lists of recommended titles in each category, and that was a lot of fun. Also, an initiative that it's in its infancy, but it's something that I feel very strongly about, that we should continue to develop it, is a diversity audit of our collection. This is where we take a real scrutinizing look at how diverse our collection truly is, and identify what gaps may exist that we can rectify. And this goes beyond just the diversity of the characters in the books, but also the authors and illustrators of the books themselves. And we're starting out with the young adult fiction collection and the children's picture book collection. So hopefully that I hope to discover that our collection is representative of the Winter Park community. And if it is not, that we take steps to rectify that and make sure that everyone's voice is available in the library.
Yeah, I would like to say that I use Hoopla quite a bit. I actually start there, especially if it's an author I haven't read before and it's coming based on recommendation from a book friend, because I'm trying very hard to only purchase books that I love, and would not want to borrow to someone. That's my process now. And so I start with Hoopla and the library. I check it out there first, and if I love it, then I buy it for my collection. So Hoopla is definitely a really great resource, as well as making sure that you're staying up to date and you renew your library card. And you could also be a friend of a library too, so you can have access to more resources that are available for you. Okay, so almost last question. We can't have a panel talking about making your collection, curating your collection more inclusive without giving recommendations. So let's talk about recommendations. Who wants to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay,
go
good.
ahead. Go ahead. You go first, Lisa.
Okay, well, this is a book that I just read by Akwaeke Emezi. It's called Pet, and it's a very strange genre-identifying but astonishing little book that's more like an allegorical fable of a utopian society. And they live under this creed that they borrowed from poet Gwendolyn Brooks. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And the setting of this book is like the epitome of inclusion. They've got seamless melding of African diasporic languages in the townsfolk dialogue. They've got a 3-parent family. The protagonist's parents are very affirming and celebrating of Jem's transgender identity. But it's also a caution that this hard-won idyllic society they live in has to be tended to and maintained, lest the monsters that they got rid of threaten their new way of life. And that is where Pet and Jam come in. And it's a fantastic book. I recommend it, but I also say, if at the beginning you're saying, what the heck am I reading? Stick with it, because it will stay with you when you're done.
I agree. That book is awesome. I recommend The Undocumented Americans by Karla, Cornejo, Villavicencio. And this is about, Karla is an undocumented individual, and she talks about her life mixed in with some reporting with other undocumented individuals who in different locations, in Miami, in Staten Island, and another location about an individual who was living in a church for sanctuary. It's very good reporting with her life mixed in and what she's experienced as an undocumented person. And it's impactful, it's educational. She is raw, and she gives us very hard examples of what life is like for those individuals, but it makes you so, it's deeply impactful, and you will learn so much through her story and these stories, and I highly recommend people read this book.
I recently read a book called Arctic Fury by Greer Macallister, and it caught my eye because it's a historical fiction, and it's about a real-life event, a search for the Franklin expedition. Sir John Franklin was a British explorer who was exploring the Arctic in the 1850s, and his 2 ships ran aground in the ice, and they were never heard from again. I mean, there have been pieces of the ships found just within the last 10 or 15 years. But I've always been interested in reading about that particular topic, always in nonfiction books. So imagine my pleasure when I saw that there was a novel, a historical novel about it, but also from the female perspective. It imagines what if there was a crew of women explorers who went out to find that expedition, because over the centuries there had been groups of men who had been sent out there, you know, naval men, even other crews, even sent by, I believe, Lincoln at the time when he was in office, was recruited to send, was able to send people to search for Franklin's crew. And so this particular book was written from the female perspective, and what would life be like for women out there in an area that is more friendly and known to men, those types of experiences. So that was fascinating. I should say that did not actually happen. There was not a group of women who went searching for the expedition, but it was interesting to imagine what the conditions would have been like, what resistance this group of women met, what responses were met with them when they came back, because there were some deaths involved, and how that played out in a trial eventually. So I would really recommend that book, not only just to get to know about what happened with the expedition background, but also to see, you know, how might women have been treated back in the day were they to go on such an expedition in such an unforgiving land as the Arctic.
Who was the author of that, Nicole?
Greer, Greer, Macallister. I think it might have been on the bestseller list for a week, but I read it long before it was about.
And I know I said I wasn't going to give one recommendation. I feel like I can't. So what I'm going to do is not give a romance recommendation, because I wouldn't want to leave out anyone. And I'm going to do one of my 5-star reads for the year, which is Ring Shout by Djèlí. It's a horror fantasy, and I don't typically read, but it's a really short book. It's about monster hunters, and the monsters are taking over human shape, and they are looking for people who are displaying hateful behavior. And so the monsters are called Hoopla, and so they are feeding off of the hate of people and looking for people who are trying to consume more power. So it's definitely an interesting commentary about how hate and discrimination manifests over time. And if you love the hero trope, or the savior trope, it will be really interesting, because there's some queer characters. Most of the main characters are women, and they are essentially maintaining the balance between our life and the lives, and pushing back on these monsters that are trying to take over what we would consider our Earth. And so I thought it was really fascinating. And because it's a shorter book, I think if you're not used to reading fantasy, I think you can engage with the text because it's shorter and the world building is pretty concise. So I think we have some time to do audience questions, unless anyone wants to do any more book recommendations. I could probably be here all day.
I know.
Don't get me to start talking about romance.
I know. I can give book recommendations if y'all want, but we'll be here for a while.
Okay. I don't see any audience questions quite yet. So Jessica, if you want to give maybe one more, and then we'll jump into questions.
Right now I'm almost finished with Aftershocks by Nadia Owusu, and this was on Malala's book club pick, and this has been such a great read. It talks about her global life. Her father it's a memoir. Her father was a UN ambassador, and he was from Ghana, and it basically talks about she talks about him, who's a big hero in her life, and her upbringing when she lost her mother. Well, she didn't lose her mother. Her mother just separated from her and her sister, and so her father was left to raise her and her sister, and then she has a stepmother, and they have a baby brother as well. And it's such a great social commentary on race and global life. Also with a trauma experience through losing a parent, not because they died, but because they walked away, and having to deal with that loss, as well as the loss of a parent through death. So it's just this whole just connection of life, the global upbringing, living abroad, then living in the United States, being biracial as well. And so I highly recommend, if you like memoirs, this one is such a great read. So that's another recommendation.
And I
I
think
actually have a question for Jessica, if there is. Okay, so as far as the Teen Book Guild, which I mentioned earlier, it's a very diverse group of people. It's small, but extremely diverse. And so far as their social media engagement, they have a blog where they review books, really thoughtfully written reviews. But I would like for them to also move into like the Instagram arena. What do you think would be the most like impactful or meaningful post that they could make that would sort of garner the interest for their voices, I guess would be my question to you.
Okay, these are teens who are trying to make posts for Instagram that are that's book related.
Is to spread the love of books to other teens in the community, especially books that are own voices.
Oh, that's a great question. If they wanted to post about the books, I suggest the post that they can make is, put themselves in the post, holding the books that they love and recommend, and talk about why they love those books. So if it's a group picture or you go individual, somebody goes one day and talks about the books and why they love the book, why it relates to them, or why other readers should read the book. But people may be nervous about putting themselves in a post, but really show your face with that book, and that will be impactful, and people really will connect with like, oh, they love that book, oh, that person looks like me, or they love this book and they said this is the reason why, and that would really like push readers to really or that would help others to like say, oh, maybe I should read this because they really connected to it, like what they have to say about it.
Yeah, and if I could add on to that, I think depending on the time the post happens, combining it with teen-specific hashtags to help drive engagement. And what I found is that if the poster talks about why they like the book and then asks a question about, well, if you've read the book, comment below and tell me why you like the book. And that way, the combination of the hashtag plus the question, there will be a little bit more engagement under the post. And then sometimes it garners a follow because it's pushing out the post to people who are following those hashtags.
Excellent advice.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I find, and I've found this out, if you put multiple books in a post, that really pushes it as well. Like, we can talk about engagement all day long and what's good and what's not good. But if they want to go out there and push their Instagram and their stories, put multiple books in that picture and say, I love all of these books. And then and the next post could be very deep, go deeper with the next post. So engagement could look very differently depending on the day, the time, right? And so now also book talk is a thing, and it's bigger and it's growing. And in 2020, when I was building my Bookstagram, I should have been building a book talk, but we'll talk about that another day. But seriously, the young people are on Book Talk, which is TikTok, that talks about books, and they might want to engage there as well.
And you can feed those videos to Instagram. So
yes,
since you
and they cross over.
so they talk to you. So if you already have an established community on Instagram, you'll pull the book folks and Instagram folks, you know, and they'll be able to see this content. And I feel like, to Jessica's point, young people are on Book Talk because you can show your personality. It's these really quick videos, and you get to cosplay, which I find younger readers enjoy doing that. And so that might be an opportunity to do cross post between platforms. And again, we probably could stay here all day and talk about engagement. But I think at the end of the day, making sure that whoever's hosting the Instagram page, if there's one person who likes the book, that should be an encouragement that you're connecting with someone about the content that you enjoy. And so, you know, to manage the expectations of how many people are engaging with it will range for a number of reasons. So cool. So I think Raquel was trying to chime in, and I think we have time for maybe one or two questions. Hi, Raquel.
Hey, how are you? So that was a really great conversation, you guys. There aren't any questions in the box, but I do have, I can ask a question to you all. Do you feel as though it is your personal responsibility, like you as an individual, do you think it is your responsibility to use your platform in whatever capacity that is, whether you are a librarian or you are a book blogger, etc., to elevate diverse voices?
I would like to answer that quickly. I actually had a note for that, ready for that question. One of the principles of library science is every reader his or her book. Now, first of all, that should be updated, I think, to say every reader his or her or their book, but nevertheless, libraries and librarians have always been about access, helping people find the right books to read for themselves. And with that in mind, I think librarians have always been about inclusivity forever. So we've been doing it behind the scenes for many years. We're glad it's catching on, I think. So every reader, his, her, or their book, definitely.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, Nicole. I think, yeah, that's our mandate as librarians, but also on a personal level, yeah, it's my responsibility to do that for myself. And I embrace that responsibility, and I've vastly expanded my experiences just by reading other people's stories, and I'm so appreciative of that. It's been a wild journey, and I can't wait to read more.
Yeah, I think the short answer is that it's a personal priority, but I also think people who follow me also just expect it. They expect to hear Alyssa Cole, Katrina Jackson, Christina C. Jones, Tasha L. You know, so they know that I will talk about certain authors, right? But they're also curious to see outside of those authors who I'm also reading. And so for me, it's almost a challenge to change it up, because people assume I'm going to read certain people, and then when I, present something else, it's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that for you. So yeah, I think it's definitely a priority, but also I think it helps me stay fresh and current, and making sure that I'm updating my language, because language is also fluid. So yeah.
Oh, I don't think we can hear Jessica.
Sorry. Yeah, I agree. I think it's a personal obligation to let people know and bring those diverse stories to others, especially if I had such a hard time finding authors. I think I want to be the one to help others find diverse authors.
Great, you guys. I love what every single one of you are doing. The whole point of this was to show that literary activism is multi-layered, right? We each sort of have our roles, and we have different things that we could do to make sure that, the publishing landscape eventually gets more diverse. It's getting a lot better, you know, but we still got a lot of work to do. But I really appreciate what each and every one of you do. And I know that personally, you know, it's helped me. So like, especially Jessica and Linnell, you know, I follow your accounts and recommend your accounts, and just everybody keep up the great work, you know. Thank you. And thank you guys for your insight as well today.
Thank
It was a
you.
pleasure. And always,
Thanks.
All right, so I think we're right at 1:47, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up. We do have another panel, one more, and it is at 2 p.m. About poetry. So well versed in all. What was the title, Nicole? Well versed in all.
genre, I think. I can't remember. I remember the well versed.
Yeah, I just call it well versed. Like that's the name that I refer to it. But
Good play on words.
that was on Nicole.
In all backgrounds.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yep.
well versed in all backgrounds. So if anybody's free, feel free to join us for that, and we'll see everybody there. Thanks again so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.